Welcome everyone to our part 3 of overcoming issues with perception. Today we want to talk about how we can develop our spiritual senses, our perception senses. And yes, you all know me. My name is Jona Bryndis, and this is a workshop in a series of 12 sessions, roughly 2 hours each. We are at the sixth of these building a bridge between spiritual and material worlds workshops. And today we will conclude issues with perception. So thank you very much for coming. I'm so glad that you all made it. If you are watching this as a video recording, please comment. All right, let us know about your questions. Those of you who are here live, please remember that this is a workshop. This is not a lecture. This is a workshop. In other words, it's designed to interact with you. It's designed to interact with your questions and your sharing. Yeah, so this 3-part workshop is here to discuss issues with perception and discernment of truth and reality. Just real quick here, a list of takeaways from part 1. We learned about the different channels of perception. This was quite interesting for you to look at yourself as, someone who has primary channels of perception. And when I say perception, I meant this in a very broad sense, like what kind of information you primarily process. Yeah, so whether you're like primarily an auditory person or a kinesthetic person or a visual person, those are very important things to know about yourself, because they will not only express in the word choice that you use, they will literally express in every sort of aspect of your life. Yeah, if you're a visual person, all you got to see is a map, and you will remember where to go and how to get there. If you're an auditory person, you need somebody to actually explain it to you. If you're a kinesthetic person, you need to somehow connect this with a memory of these places. Yeah, and if you just listen to someone describing to you how to get there, you're not going to retain any kind of information. Yeah, so just as an example, so know this about yourself. We all have multiple organs and senses of perception. We're going to talk about this in detail today. But these primary channels, yeah, this is very, very broad, all right? That you need to know. The more you train your perception, meaning the more you actually use all of your senses, all right, the less dependent you're going to be on, your primary channels. We also realize that, our spiritual senses and organs, that we're actually not using them as much as we could, or perhaps some of you thought should. How did we find out about this? Well, we're primarily relying on our 5 senses, on the ones that relate to the material world, that relate to our body. So that's something just to keep in the back of our minds, that we're not really taught how to use our organs of spiritual or higher perception. We're not even taught how to use our thinking correctly. So these are things that many of us found out, that need to be trained, they need to be purified, they need to be refined. And this is why we're here. Our perception is filtered by our ego most of the time, or our ego's agenda, and therefore not a very good measuring tool. We literally can't believe anything that we perceive until we purify and refine our perception. If we just listen to the voice in our heads, we're not going to get very far. And we're going to understand today why that is the case. We also got a glimpse of understanding of the link between our energetic state and what we are perceiving, or how we're interpreting what we're perceiving. Yeah, so you can see this goes very deep into detail here. All right, and in this first part, we primarily focused on becoming more aware of these filters of perception. Yeah, how much of the information gets either just completely filtered out or avoided, or modified or justified or excused or somehow altered in our daily lives. Yeah, we all do this. So this requires a little bit of training and discipline. Yeah, we've learned a few vocabulary words here, and we became very much aware of these limitations of our perception. So this is really, where we started. We all recognized that besides, like these unrealistic expectations that we have when it comes to awakening or spiritual training, yeah, we believe that it's all bliss and that it's all right, and feel frustrated or disempowered when that is not the case. So we, the first stage of awakening and the first stage of actually consciously using your senses of perception and your thinking correctly is that you realize how much you can't trust your thinking, how much you can't trust your senses, how much you're actually altering. Yeah, and this all happens without us being aware. So there's a strong need, yeah, to become more aware of how these internal thinking processes work, and therefore, better understand our own journey and why we make so many quote unquote mistakes in thinking. Yeah, why there are times when we cannot really see straight, when we make choices based on interpretations, based on what we perceive at the time, but perhaps completely out of context with our values or with our morals or what we stand for. And this happens to all of us. And there's many different reasons. We put them together here. This is all your guys' input. Thank you so much for this. I see the slide here. And then we went on to discuss what we can do about this. All right, so first we figured out that perception is really not about getting sort of grand visions. It's about becoming able to discern truth, because once you discover how limited your mind is without training, yeah, your unprepared, untrained mind, you start questioning yourself. You start questioning your sense of truth, and rightly so, because without you actually going into the work of establishing this with yourself and consciously experiencing reference feelings for what is true in your heart, what is true, based on all of your senses and, your values and so forth, you can't really make good choices. So it is to be expected, yeah, that you have error perceptions, that you make, non-conducive choices for yourself, because you're not really aware of all the information that you need to make good choices. In other words, you are not actually able to discern truth. So we pointed out the need for this in our part 2, and we also realized that there is a bit of a of a measuring tool in us for that. We call this psychic confliction or excruciating pain. Yeah, the cognitive dissonance in us. So whenever we are in a schismatic state, whenever there is conflicting aspects clashing in our brain, all right, there is it's called a cognitive dissonance. We are experiencing a deep sense of psychic pain. Yeah, psychic, not in the sense of psychological and not in the sense of spiritual, in the sense of our psyche experiences that. Yeah. And we actually realized through our discussion that the higher the level of inner confliction, of inner schism, yeah, the more unresolved things we carry around, the more things we try to avoid, or we try to justify or excuse away. Yeah, the higher the degree of our error perception. Yeah, the less, yeah, you know, the least likely we are able to discern truth. So that's quite a bit of an insight here that we needed to digest. Yeah, and many of you had fantastic suggestions as to how to mitigate this, how to shift our energy, how to create the space for reflecting on our perceptions. And really, that's what it came down to. We just have to take more time. We just have to slow down and actually face what it is that is coming in internally and look at it. Yeah, and make the unconscious conscious. Yeah, because most of you complained that the biggest issue with those error perceptions is that it leads, to unconscious reactions. We call them coping. All right, we're just sort of trying to cope uncomfortable feelings away, which then, in consequence, prevents us from detecting when we have a conflict, when we are not really congruent within ourselves. So you guys nailed it. We need to pay attention to our conflictions, not confections, our conflictions, okay? Because they are the ones that can inform us when something isn't going right, when it, in regard to our perception. So whenever we have a conflict, we need to set aside time and space and look at it. Why is this rubbing me the wrong way? Why is this creating so much dissonance in me? Why, am I having such a hard time with this? Many of you, and this might be due to trauma or other things, childhood things, uh, are very disconnected from your body sensations, even though you can describe them, but you're not actually connecting with them. You're not actually allowing them to be part of the game. The same with your feelings. So this is something that we're going to cover today. You guys have, detected why there is a sort of an unconscious suppression of negative feelings. And, that it's really important that we liberate ourselves from these barriers, um, ultimately because they also prevent us from manifesting the life that we want. Yeah. So, for example, if you grew up in poverty and you have a real negative, like unconscious memory of, not having enough, like having, scarcity and lack in your life, then that can really block you from recognizing certain things, and also, make it impossible for you to see when you're sabotaging yourself. And one of you added rightly, that ultimately we need to remember who we truly are. We need to remember, that we're a soul with a body, okay, or that is a soul that is having a physical experience of our higher self, and therefore, perhaps recognize that it is our more immaterial things in life, and also with it, the parts in us that allow us to see those, that we should pay more attention to. Yeah. Um, but this is subject of other workshops that we've already done, and that we are doing in a parallel workshop series called Electrification and Etherization, yeah, which is about, the purpose of it all, like why are we even here, and what happens based on our choices. Yeah, what are the consequences of our choices? Are there any at all, etc. So here at this point, I would like to turn the microphone to you guys and ask you what your experiences are in regard to error perception. Yeah, so false perceptions where you fell for the wrong thing. Yeah, where you were not able to see something in a given moment or a certain phase in your life. And in hindsight, if you looked at it and you shook your head and you asked yourself, how is it possible that I could not see that? How did I not see this? Have you ever had those kind of moments in your life where you look back and you say, of course, I was an error there. Of course, this was a really bad choice for me. And we all, we're here to make experiences and to learn. But many of us have a really hard time with understanding ourselves. Like, why did we not see that? Has anybody ever asked themselves that? How did I not see this? Looking back. Nobody? Yeah, Janet. Okay. I'm so glad that you raised your hand. I mean, my life is full of these kind of experiences where I look back and I ask myself, wow, I mean, was I on drugs or something? Or was I under a spell? Or what was going on in me that I could not see this? I see this as clear as day today, from today's perspective, but I did not see this back then. What was that like for you, Janet, if you don't mind sharing?
It's nobody else here, but it doesn't matter. Um, I've found it very useful to look back because there's plenty of those moments, very recently even, where I come out. It's like coming out of something and having to resolve it. And really, the biggest step for me is to be able to make a big acceptance of the whole thing, because then I
Mm-hmm.
can form a wider vision about what actually happened and what I can learn from it. I just had this occur to me today, that the usefulness of going into the past would be one useful thing when one's mind, or when I go back into a past memory or energy comes up. The best thing that I can do with that is like this: get a perspective and get wiser from it, obtain wisdom from it, rather than of missing that point. Part of
Mm-hmm.
part of well, it's obviously you're not, and I'm going to jump into something kind of funny for a moment. Um, Sometimes I refer to my birth sign, my astrological sign, just as a little possibility of how and why things happen in my life, and
Okay.
kind of a teaching guide, like, well, if a person is, uh, if I'm predisposed to respond to situations in a certain way over and over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
and this is one possibility why, then at least I have a marker of where to go. Okay, stop a minute. There's other possibilities. Just
Okay.
take a look at them.
What's your
Yeah,
astrological sign?
I'm an Aries,
Without you, Aries. Okay. And
which is,
and that's tropical.
well, what's about Aries, which obviously isn't the only thing here, because as far as I know, if you don't mind me saying, you're a Scorpio, which is further down the line on the astrological chart, and Aries is being the first one, has a tendency to um, be paralleled with child childish.
Mm-hmm.
It's like early naivety, and because it's the youngest, quote unquote, in the family of signs
But you're not talking about
that,
Vedic astrology, right? I was just asking what kind of astrological system you're using for the zodiac.
oh, it's just typical. I don't. It's nothing
Western,
deep Vedic.
Western.
Yeah, Western
Mm-hmm.
astrology, more or less,
Mm-hmm.
and those kind of basics and in-depth things. So anyway, I guess the point here is um, I've seen those error perceptions, and I've been able to discern between moments where times where I've had error perceptions, but didn't really make use of looking back at it and seeing
Mm-hmm.
what happened. And thankfully, I've had time with other issues and other experiences recently to be able to look at it and go, okay, this is what do I need to learn, and listen to that lesson.
Yeah, it's a beautiful insight. Thank you for sharing this with us. And that's, I
Yeah,
can
you're
only
welcome.
subscribe this, subscribe to this because, this is, our entire life is about learning experiences. And the wisdom comes out of looking back and understanding ourselves better, why we did this. Now, I have no preoccupation, and especially not a negative preoccupation with astrology. Astrology has been used for thousands of years. Okay, and even the zodiacs, to take 12 categories of people, and sort of classify certain tendencies and personalities. That's a much more differentiated way of looking at humans than just two, like good and bad, or nice and annoying, or whatever. You know what I mean? So
I see. Yeah.
yeah, so I understand, and I understand astrology from a deep spiritual point of view, and so I don't have any problem with you bringing this in here. If you look at the characteristics of Aries, it's like doing first and thinking later. Okay, and a lot of times the thinking doesn't come, which would be the equivalent of the wisdom. Like that part. Like actually looking at, how did I feel? What made me act? What made me do this? And the positive sides of Aries is clearly, the ability to create something new, that strong drive and life force to actually go and do something, yeah, which a lot of people are missing. All right. That can make you become a doer. Yeah. All the doers and the shakers in this world are Aries's. Okay. Because they have that drive, and there's no judgment with comparing it with a sort of raw life force, and therefore at the beginning of the refinement process, at the very very beginning, yeah, and to look at the personalities that come in with the other zodiacs as sort of certain stages of refinement, all coming in with a different aspect of life that they are refining. Okay. So Aries is a very, very creative and a very powerful sign. If it comes with wisdom, it's extremely powerful. It often doesn't, and that's why Aries has a little bit of a bad rep. Okay, yeah, but that's about it. Okay, in general, I'd say we all have a cross to carry. It doesn't matter the birth hour, and the birth day and month and location, perhaps predisposes us to certain things, just like our karma does, just like our nuclear family does, just like the country of origin, our ethnicity, yeah, and DNA lineage. Those are all things that predispose us to certain things, just sort of as the cards that we are being dealt. We talked about this at length when we talked about karma, but we still have the free will. Okay, and this is really the point here, is that we refine our sense of freedom, our will, so that regardless of what the predisposition is, all right, that we can make choices, for example, based on wisdom, based on our values based on our integrity. All right. So we all have to have some cards to start the game with. You know what I mean? And whether that's random or whether that's determined by uh, the, the constellations and where the planets were and how they're transiting you and so forth. We don't really have to discuss that because at the end of the day, it's so multifactorial that we'll never fully get the whole picture. Okay, so I'm okay with that. So for all of you guys, if you have a way of contextualizing things in regards to your astrological sign, I don't think that's a mistake. All right.
Well, it's true. I mean, as an Aries, I kind of don't take it as I kind of take it as interesting learning that I feel resonates and experiences in terms of seeing people's actual things reflected in them, and learning a little bit further into all the different like what's rising, what's this, and what's in your Mercury and what's in your Venus. And it gives depth to people in a certain, in Doctor Strange, that movie where he is yelling, he yells, he's like face to face with I forget her name, the head lady, and he's like, she's showing him the chakras and all this other kind of stuff. To me, it's just a bit of a tool. It is either going to work or not. You either need a hammer
Mm-hmm.
or a screwdriver,
Mm-hmm.
but they're both good tools. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I find that not to take it seriously, but to consider it a little bit is at least expanding. At least it's expanded my mind in terms of information. When to find a perception map. As we're
Yes.
talking about it, there's
Yeah.
different layers of perceiving something, and if
Yes.
one's not able to go deep in right away and click their snap their fingers and know exactly what's going on for that person in a second, it's a way to at least shift perception, uh,
Mm-hmm.
neural pathways.
It's a context. All right. It's the This is really what you're doing. You're setting it into context with something. And setting it into context with something is better than nothing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
do you know what I mean? It's like you said, it's a good start. You did, however, raise another quite interesting question, and that is the purpose or the use of looking back into the past. That's something that I would like to also keep here as a sticky note. All right. If you guys want to share a little bit more of what your experiences are with your own error perceptions of the past, because we look at the past. We look at the past and we look at, oh my God, how could I not see this back then? Those are typical error perceptions. So we're doing this right now. We're looking into the past. And let's keep that in mind, that maybe there's no real use or purpose of doing that. But right now, just for the sake of, sort of breaking the ice here and getting a discussion going, I think it's a useful tool. Let's look into the past. Let's look at things that um, we chose, we did, or we saw ourselves doing. Okay, and in hindsight, we're like, oh my God, why did I do that? How come I didn't see that? Or things like that. Simply for the sake of helping you guys understand that if you get stuck in that place of judging yourself for your past or for your past choices or for your past way of thinking or contextualizing things, then you might want to shift that. Okay, so Janet here, thank you. You gave us a very good reason to look back and to learn from past experiences, not necessarily from perceived mistakes or whatever, but in general, to look back and to gain wisdom from all experiences. This is something that I could subscribe. This is correct in that way that it helps us. It's a tool. How we interpret and how we see things today compared to how we saw things back in the day or yesterday or this morning, that's another story. So let's go there a little bit. Let's go a little deeper there. Who of you specifically remembers those kind of thought processes where you looked into your past and you asked yourself, how come I did not see this? And what, I saw something, I was very convinced. Yeah, maybe you joined a spiritual group and they were doing stuff and you thought 100% this was the right thing, or a political group, or I don't know, a church, or even a family constellation, or a marriage, or whatever, and it went bad, and you look back and you're like, how come I didn't see this?
Or even, I'd have to say, I know you're looking at some of the negative things, but in that context, there's also a few that are also positive. Like, oh my gosh, how did, thank goodness that information came to me. I don't
Yeah,
know where it came from. Like, I was part of that group, but I didn't drink the Kool-Aid. Goodness, thank you.
yeah. No, totally. I'm not looking for negative experiences. I'm looking for that aha moment, okay, where we look back and we can clearly recognize that we could not see something at a certain time, or maybe we could not see something, but we had an inner instinct. So I'm looking for that moment. Okay, we had an instinct or inner guidance or something, that in the end helped us to get away, or made us want to get a divorce, or prevented us from going down the rabbit hole or whatever. What are some of your experiences? Let's take church or spiritual groups. Has anyone here ever been part of a church or a spiritual group, or a political group for that matter, but groups, okay, where you were all gung-ho and you were all, like in it, and you were 100% convinced that this is the way to go for you, and it was the best thing ever, only to find out later, that it really wasn't. Okay, and let's take relationships. Who of you, has ever been in a relationship? You were all gung-ho, you were convinced this is the partner of your life, this is your soulmate, you're going to end up getting all together, this is the best ever that could have happened to you, only to find out it really isn't. Where you then had to kind of reverse things or get out. Got divorced.
I'll give my 1 minute version of this one with just one of the relationships with my marriage, because you talk about it and I realized I didn't have that feeling. I wasn't a commitment I was making to somebody I considered like my soul. Oh, I found my soulmate for life, and consider it now and go, maybe I could have been looking a little bit closer for that, even though I think it's a bit of a romantic thing. I think uh, that's the person I chose to be with was for a whole different feeling, and it kept me from being mm, discerning. It kept me from being discerning. I was
What
not
kept you from
looking.
being discerning?
That it wasn't me deciding, oh, I want to, I'm looking. I had a picture of who I was and that I wanted to get married to a certain kind of person. It was somebody who came along,
Okay.
and I didn't question. I didn't question much.
Okay.
I was I was in a relationship where I wasn't questioning things that were awkward or non-communicative or unhealthy.
Hmm.
So yeah,
So that's the
not
hindsight,
having.
okay? The
Yeah,
hindsight is
that's
that
the
you can
hindsight.
see this now, okay? That there
Yeah,
were things that were unhealthy. There was no communication. What else do you know now that you couldn't see then? For whatever reason, we're not even talking about reasons. We're just talking about this moment where you realize, wow, I did not see that. I literally couldn't see that.
yeah. I couldn't see any of these things because I was so. I think here this is part of the lesson too. I was so involved in me and my life, and this
Uh-huh.
person was so, I guess, enamored with me and who I was, that I was equally in love with myself. That I
Okay,
didn't turn it around. That's
okay,
obviously a narcissistic trait, I think, to a certain extent. Although I was living in New York, so that was kind of a way of survival, quote unquote, or just the drive of my life, or me being an Aries. Um, that you know Later on, when I did did join a spiritual group, I was meeting people who were like totally different to be around, and I was feeling warm and loved and stuff. And I
okay.
realized that in the biggest relationship that I had going, that I didn't feel that way, and it was like,
Okay.
oh.
No, I mean this is wonderful, Janet, what you're sharing here, and very heartfelt and honest. You know, you didn't question much. Um, you were kind of like, sort of stuck, like stuck in yourself. It was all just about yourself and how you see yourself, and maybe how you see yourself with the prop of marriage and the prop of the person and the prop of what came with that. Okay, but it's very honest, and you didn't have a reference feeling. You didn't have anything to compare it with. All right, so it wasn't until you actually experienced something different, until you experienced people, and I'm filling in the blanks here, that you could connect with, where you felt something, not romantically, but just some, I don't know, what would you say, warmth
Well, it was. I
or
could see
just
the difference.
humanness?
The difference was I was kind of living out a script. So
Uh-huh.
my relationship was easily fell into a bunch of dysfunctions, which I was raised with. So it seemed
Mm-hmm.
normal, and
Mm-hmm.
it was fitting my goal. I was going, okay,
Right,
this is
yeah.
what happened. So now I'm going to get married.
Mm-hmm.
However, then when I met people, and I had started to learn how to meditate, and because things were starting to get karmic, like why these things at that time I didn't have a word for it, but it was like this feeling of like, okay, now something keeps happening that's not right. I keep
Mm-hmm.
making the same quote unquote mistake, although I don't remember what that was. I think it usually wound up that mistake was uh, things happening in life, not catching them, and then getting mental and emotional about it, and then your energy is kind of gone, and
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
wasn't
you got caught
managing my energy.
in that psychic
Yeah,
pain that I mentioned earlier, the cognitive dissonance. So
yeah,
something didn't feel right, and it just felt painful somehow, like internally, not physically or anything. You didn't know what it was. You had no reference, so you couldn't compare it. Okay, but something didn't add up internally.
yeah.
Externally, you felt like you hit the jackpot, but internally, it felt maybe empty. I'm filling in the blanks here, or that things aren't authentic, or that it's, yeah, empty. I mean, empty is what most people use to describe this, yeah, because
Uh
it
huh.
seems so great on the outside, but there's nothing in there. There's
It was
no
always moments
fulfillment.
of trying to talk to a brick wall. it's the visual that I most have in
Hmm.
terms of like actually having intimacy in terms of growing that way. So when I started growing in terms of self inquiry about changing my diet, about raising my child, all those things appeared. And then the issues with the other person got magnified, and
Okay.
I couldn't ignore them
You
with
just,
any
you just,
consciousness.
yeah, you just said something very important. It was the moment that you started growing, the moment you started working with yourself,
Yeah.
is when the outer conflicts started happening. Yeah. The problems got magnified to a point, I guess, where it was impossible to ignore them, where you had to look at them.
Well, well, becoming, I believe that once you start to learn, if you learn something and you know it's the right thing to do, you're supposed to do it. To ignore it is like really, this was me just making this up at this very moment, but I've never put it in these words, but it's like
Hmm.
denying the universe to be taught something for your own good and then ignore is
Hmm.
not the good idea. The good idea is to step into it uh and go, okay, well, I see this now, and you know, I didn't take the wisest steps in terms of changing everything. I could have done all that stuff perhaps a little better, but
From today's perspective, but from
yeah,
back then's perspective, probably not. Okay, so I mean, not to go into fatalism, but like if you could not see things at a certain time in your life, you could also not have investigated the tools, or the strategies that are needed to mitigate that yet. So we should we should all be a little softer and more forgiving with ourselves here, because when you're just in the process of discovering something, all right, you have not, this is like a huge big moment in your life when your own internalized insight forms. All right, you don't necessarily have the tools right away to materialize that. You have to practice that. That's a refinement process. So the purification is when you actually start seeing something, when these filters that I talked about earlier, when they start falling away. And now you're seeing more, and now you got a
yeah,
problem. Now you got to do
yeah,
something about it if you want to live consciously. Now, you can also choose to, cope them away and to excuse them or justify them or take drugs or, watch TV all day or play video games or whatever, just so that you don't have to look at it. Yeah, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about those moments where you have an insight, a conscious insight, and you realize that that is something that you should follow. That is an inner guidance coming forward. That's a wisdom that is forming in you. And the refinement process is then developing the tools, developing the strategies. And well, how do we develop strategies? How do we develop tools? You can probably guess it, by trying, by experimenting, by doing something. Yeah.
well, well, two things that come up right now, which three things are very important. One for me at least was part of the impetus besides me growing was hand in hand with having a child and saying, oh,
Mhm.
i have to I have to do this right. That was at least my motivation. And you're one of the biggest points of what you're saying here, I think, is the non-judgment. Non-judgment about the past,
Mhm.
non-judgment right now, non-judgment about what might happen in the
Yeah.
future, because then those there's less fewer clouds, and the non-judgment, like
Yeah.
you were saying, is so it's like a magic tool that drops all that,
Because
and you
at
can
the end of
live.
the day, it's a much bigger process than we think it is. We're not supposed to know everything. We're not supposed to
Yeah.
have everything figured out. Okay. We're supposed to go through it consciously, have a conscious insight. Yeah. Consciously clear our error perceptions and consciously develop tools and strategies to work with it to a point where we actually start feeling authentic or congruent. All right. It's an approximation, because as we continue to grow, our values might change, our perspectives might change, the way we interpret things might change. Nowadays, you might not be of the same opinion like you were when you were 20. You might not believe that marriage is, the all in life. Okay. Yeah. You might have changed your opinion through all these experiences and the wisdom that you've gathered. And therefore, you're kind of immune, or, less susceptible to that kind of externalized view of your life. You've
And also
internalized your life more. Hmm.
less susceptible to being negative about it. Again, like you're saying, it
Hmm.
not to be judgmental and to be kind to ourselves, because then the actual lesson is learned. Because
Yeah.
the lesson is not going to be, oh, I'll never get married because men are a bunch of pigs. No, that's not. That's a lesson that could be learned just by some people. However, the real existence one, it's I mean, I'm just saying here, repeating it over and over again, because if nobody understands it, it's one of the biggest tools, is to be able to appreciate who it's a whole other perspective too, looking
Yeah.
back on the past, to go, I want to look back and appreciate who I was at this point, and this point,
Hmm.
and see what shows up, because
Yeah.
it might be very different from what's shown up before, and it
Yeah.
heals it, and then
Yes.
you're a different person at that point. At least I am.
Yeah. That's how the healing process works. Yeah. So the healing is part of the refining. Yeah. It's looking back and understanding yourselves better. Understand that at the time you couldn't have done it differently. You couldn't see this before, but now you can. So the immediacy is always with the now. Because as soon as you have an insight, as soon as you've gathered wisdom, the pressure is on you now to actually materialize it, to actualize it, to not make the same mistake again, which many of us do multiple times, until we get to this point in life where we stop judging, we stop thinking, we're just done. We're just done with something. We no longer want this in our lives. This is how our will forms, guys, not just in this sort of negative sense, also in a positive sense. Yeah? We're done with, the shallowness, or the emptiness, or the uh, confliction, the struggle in our lives. We're done. We don't have to. It's a choice. We're just not aware that we're making this choice. And so the trick is, yeah, to let go of the judgment. That's one of the big filters that many of us still have to learn to let go of. Yeah, remove all these things, these barriers of perception, so that we can get to the core of who we are and what we stand for, what our values are, what our needs are, what our boundaries are, and just stand in that and say, well, this is who I am. This is who I am now. And yes, I used to see this differently. And yes, I used to act differently. I used to say things differently, whatever. But that was then. I couldn't see this before. I see it now. So take it or leave it. All right. There's a power that comes with that. Okay. And in spiritual sciences, we call this the will. Yeah. So the will is something that comes out of your conscious insight. Yeah, the wisdom that you've gathered, and your conscious intention, what it is that you are following. Any more comments here? Thank you so much, Janet. This was a very beautiful contribution, and you wrapped up and touched upon many different aspects of our perceptions here. So I'm very grateful for that. Does anybody else want to comment or share their experiences? Okay. Then let's jump into, these 4 core perception questions that we should ask ourselves. We should ask ourselves what our overall state of energy is, and this refers to the present moment, right now. What is my overall state of energy? Am I tired and hungry? Am I frustrated? Am I sad or angry? What is my overall state? Not just this moment, but what's sort of the tendency that I'm having right now? Am I stressed out? Am I calm and laid back? Am I feeling content or even fulfilled? Do I feel balance in my life? Yeah, or all the different areas of my life sort of well balanced? We should always ask ourselves this question first. Why? Why do you think that is? Why should we ask ourselves what our overall state of energy is at a given moment? Let's say before making a choice. That choice could be as simple as, should I have a cheese sandwich or should I have a cucumber sandwich? But probably more important, let's focus on the more important ones. Should I marry this guy or not? Or should I move into a different country? Or should I have a child or not? Or should I quit my job or not? Or should I start my own business or not? Yeah, those are like sort of the typical questions that come up in our life when we start to grow and when we start to feel like we need a change. What is our overall state of energy? Why should we ask this first? Who remembers? We talk about this all the time. Okay. Let's bring up another slide just to jog your memory here.
Hi, Jona.
Yes.
I was just going to say it's like to ask myself what state I am in. What's my energy? Like am I in fear? Like maybe looking to change jobs or get a new job. I might be in fear of money. So if I recognize that I'm fearful about money, then I could be choosing to take a job through fear because it's quick and easy, and there might be something better ahead. Or the same as in a house, if I'm fearful of being homeless, then I might take the first house that comes up without. So my energy would be in a state of fear or still in a
Without
state of
questioning.
light.
What
Yeah,
Janet
so
just said
then,
earlier. Without questioning. Is
yeah,
this the right thing for me?
yeah.
Does this even
So,
feel right? Mm-hmm.
and that limits my energy is limited in that perception. So I'm more likely to be in, error perception because if I'm in a state of like on here identifying energetic states, it's like in shame or in pain or in fear, or if I'm angry I might do a quick decision and only see things, maybe believing that people are attacking me when they may not be. you know
It's a filter.
um,
Yeah.
it's a
It's a
filter,
filter.
yeah.
It filters stuff. Yeah,
Mm,
I mean, your example was very good here with the money and the job. Okay, so many of us have jobs that they actually don't like or that are actually bad for them. All right, it's not that they don't know that their jobs aren't good for them,
mm,
that they drain their energy. It's that they see themselves not having a choice. All right, out of the fear of the unknown, not knowing where the money is going to come in the future, where it's coming from, Okay, we rather stay where we're at, even though we know that it's bad for us.
Yeah, and we can feel it, and that constant feeling of dissonance within, and then creating also what I'm seeing. I'm only seeing the world as bad, that prices are going up, that might not be true, but
Everything is
because
scarce.
my focus on that, and because that's my belief, and because the energy of myself is in this feeling of dissonance and conflict and
Yeah.
uh, struggle, I actually will. It's like being in a vacuum. It's like being in that only seeing things. I think same as the internet. If you click on something, you'll keep getting tons of that subject that you're looking at. So it looks like that on the outside too. Everything does look hard and bad and like it's in struggle. So
Yeah, it's a filter. It does not allow us to discern truth, because if we see ourselves and the choices that we have and the world that we're in through the lens, for example, with fear of lack and scarcity, then we're less likely to make choices that liberate us, that help us to grow. Yeah, we're more inclined to just keep everything the way it is, even though we know it's bad for us. And you nailed it. Yes, that's what creates confliction in us, the cognitive dissonance, the excruciating pain, the psychic pain that I talked about earlier. Yeah, we got to recognize that. So all these states that you see here that are below truth, okay, all these states here in this entire section are highly conflicted states. And because they're highly conflicted, they are also bringing in a lot of cognitive dissonances, because they filter what we see, be it through our emotions or our interpretations. Okay, a lot of times it's a combination of things. And those of you who have experienced trauma know this really well, because if you have a pain memory of something, even if it was way back then, even as far back as, like, infancy or toddlerhood or whatever, you'll have a filter. Yeah, there will be certain things, like, say you were bitten by a dog, or you nearly drowned swimming in the lake. Your ability to see certain things in something positive, and having a dog or going for a swim, are very limited, because you have to deal with an overlay of negative memories. Yeah, and they filter your perception to a point where you're unable to even understand other people. Yeah, like, how come they like dogs? How come they like taking a swim in the ocean? Yeah, so there'll be certain things that you will not understand. I don't think that's, I mean, not that it's wrong to call it a vacuum, but um, for the sake of better understanding it, Julianne, I don't think it's like a vacuum. It's more like an energetic charge. It's the opposite of a vacuum. It's where you have a really strong charge towards something. You're polarized. You're not able to stand in the middle and look at things, like Janet said, in a kind way or in a non-judgmental way. You're very charged about a particular subject or a particular kind of choice, or uh, even just any sort of perception that you are, that is going through, your senses. Okay, so anything down here, okay, any general state down here will filter your perceptions drastically. In other words, when you're angry, when you're in fear, when you're in guilt, when you're in, superiority, you really can't believe anything you're thinking or perceiving. Yeah, this needs to be understood. The question number 2 is, what is the context? The context of your perceptions. This has to do with your life view. And you brought a good point. You brought up a good point here. Yeah, a context would be, how do I see the world? How do I see other people in the world? Are they all out there to get me? Is life a struggle? Life is hard. Is the world evil? Those are contices, guys. That's the sort of the backdrop of all of your perceptions. Yeah, if you see the world, and that's, yes, you identified this correctly, it's based on fear. But we already know that fear is underlying all of our filters at the end of the day. Yeah, but if my worldview is that that other people, or the world as such, or humanity is evil, or is toxic, or is fundamentally against me, all right, then everything that I will perceive will look like an attack, will look like a confirmation, yeah, of what this backdrop projects to me. Yeah, in psychology, that's called confirmation bias. And that is, for example, why these cookies on our social media accounts work the way they work, because confirmation bias is one of the most soothing and most comforting feelings, psychic feelings, that a human can experience. Did you know that? So if you had a thought, if you had an opinion, and that gets reflected back to you, let's say somebody else says something similar of what your life view is, you feel good about yourself. It makes you feel good. That's why when you go on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, you only get, the kind of posts that confirm your own bias. This is why we like to hang out with like-minded people. Yeah, because like-minded people are more likely to reflect back our own opinions. That's why we don't like people who have other opinions. It's very important to understand how your psyche works if it's not trained. This is the untrained mind. The untrained mind will fall for anything that delivers a confirmation bias, and will avoid anything that questions your own bias. Yeah, so the things that Janet reported about earlier, okay, they could only happen because there was some filter there that prevented her from seeing these things that she then later saw. So there's an internal component to this, and there's an external component. The internal is the refinement of your own senses and organs of perception. But there's also an external factor to it, and Janet, you hinted at that. When you're surrounded by people who confirm this back to you, who give you praise and validate you for all the good things, that they approve of, no matter how toxic, how evil, how bad it is, all right, you're less likely to question any of it. The third question you need to ask yourself, and this is something that you guys worked out last time yourself: am I even free enough to perceive truth? Free as in, do I give myself the space to even explore something, to question something? Can I allow myself to question something? This is a really, really important tool for the conscious person, because you have to give yourself that freedom to question, no matter what it is that you're thinking, no matter what it is that you're feeling that you are choosing. Does this stand in the face of your core values, your core needs and wants and boundaries? Can this uphold? Now, when you question yourself, is this a good choice? This is a form of freedom. And obviously not just with yourself, also with, other people's choices, or, depending on whether it concerns you or not. And core question, perception question number 4 is, how can we shift our energy so that I become able to discern truth? Yeah, this is the strategy now. Okay, these tools and strategies that I talked about earlier. How can I change that? How can I get myself into the place of non-judgment, in the place of courage, in the place of seeing truth? How can I get, from out of my depression, out of my pain, okay, or out of my anxiety, into a place of empowerment and courage and detachment? How can I get there? These 4 questions, guys, need to be your primary questions. And there's nothing about what you're perceiving. There's nothing about the content of what you're perceiving, if you may have noticed. It's all about, what state are you in? What is your worldview? What is your bias? Do I have a bias? Because if I have a bias, I'm not free. And how can I get myself, if I find myself in these lower states, how can I get myself into a place where I'm actually able to see truth? Those true self areas here, 5 and 6 and above, okay, where you actually consciously work with, your own perception. So remember these 4 questions. What is my overall state of energy? What is the context of my perceptions? Am I free enough to perceive truth? And if not, how can I shift my energy to become able to discern truth? The same could be applied to the life and worldview. Okay, am I seeing the world, or am I seeing myself as, or my life as things just happening to me? All right, then I'm in a low state here. I'm in the red area, guys. Okay, yeah. Am I seeing life as, things are happening done by me? Yeah, am I the one that does things? Right? It's not bad. It's at least better than the powerless state. However, it's still quite linear. To believe that you're the only one that does things. Okay, obviously we constantly interact with one another, so, and there's weather conditions and all that, external stuff that influences us day to day, day in, day out. Okay, so things aren't actually done by me. Okay. Or are you seeing life as, things are happening through me or with me? Now, this is an important step here, from things are happening because of me and things are happening with me or through me. This is a big step, because right here, you're actually stepping into the more spiritual, the immaterial aspect of reality. Yeah, you build a bridge between the physical and the material and the immaterial, and you're recognizing that there are much bigger things than you, that are actually determining things. And that doesn't mean that you're powerless. It just means that, you need to pay attention. And if you then grow even further into your spiritual consciousness, you experience your life as something that is happening as you. Okay? And you're not just a conduit for something. You're beginning to understand who you truly are. Okay? And that's an entirely different worldview than, seeing life and seeing the world as, happening to you. That is really, really important. So what are these senses and organs with which we perceive? All right, we talked about those primary channels, and this is just like basic, like zodiacs. Okay, it's our aptitude. Yeah, those primary channels: visual, tactile, auditory, kinesthetic. those are just, sort of almost like talents. Okay, those are the easiest channels for us to process. But this doesn't really inform us about our senses and our organs. This is just the way things are being processed. All right, so let's look at sensing, feeling, and contextualizing a little deeper. How do we sense? How do we feel? And how do we actually contextualize? How do we actually interpret these things that are coming in? So we have our five senses of reception. Okay, so this is all, top-notch science here. We have been taught that we have five senses, right? Right? These are the five. But science already knows that we have more than five. But these are the ones, you guys know this. I teach kindergartners and first graders, all right, that we typically introduce to our students as, the ones that they can relate to. They relate to, the material world. Yeah, things that you can touch, that you can hear, that you can see, that you can smell, and that you can taste. Right? And that's about the level on which that is located at, kindergarten level. Okay, that's a good thing for a kindergartner to understand. However, a kindergartner already knows that there's more to it, but unfortunately, we don't teach that. Now, most of you guys have never heard about this, but our sense for temperature, for example, is an actual sense, just like sound and smell and taste and touch. Not necessarily hearing, but like these quote unquote five senses. We have receptors for them in our brain. They are called proceptors because they're not coming in from the outside in. Okay, they're actually senses that coming in from inside out. It's quite interesting. They have different names. So, for example, our perception of, or our sense for temperature is called thermoception. All right, but it functions quite similarly, like the other quote unquote five senses. All right, there's a receptor there somewhere, and that sends signals to the brain. The same is with our sense for balance. Okay, our sense for balance is something that is also in our system. Okay, we can feel it when we're out of balance. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly because I've learned all those words in German, but it's called the vestibularic perception. Okay, so this is an actual sense. The same with our sense for movement. All right, if something is moving or not, this is an actual sense that we have. And our sense for vitality, for our life force. Most of you here are actually pretty good about this. Yeah, this is typically what we call like, energy in a way. Like how are you feeling? What is your, where's your energy at? Do you feel energetic or do you feel kind of low and tired? Yeah, so your sense for life force is not necessarily, seeing auras or anything like this. This is an internal sense. It's an internal sense that you have. Yeah, you can sense your amount of life force. Nociception, they call this. Okay. Raise your hand if you've heard about these other senses. These are the four senses in addition to your five senses. Yes, very good. Okay, I'm glad that I'm not the only one telling you things that are already scientific fact. We then have three more senses that are difficult to investigate based on our current scientific paradigm. They are acknowledged that they exist. Yeah, number one, the sense for, number three, sorry, here, the sense for speech. Yeah, so we know that humans have a sense for speech and a sense for language. All right, this is something that we all know, we all experience it, we all have it. The one more consciously than the other, but we have it. And then there's a third one, a second one, the sense for thought. Okay, this is something I noticed as a counselor and coach is not very well developed in people. Most people are actually, without training, not able to differentiate between their sensations, their feelings, and their thoughts. And I myself remember a state where I could not differentiate if something that was coming in was actually a thought, or if it was an emotion, or if it was a body sensation. It was all one for me. It was undifferentiated. Anybody here that can relate to that? Can you guys relate to that? But everything just sort of being all one, not really, different things. Yeah. Yes, I'm glad I'm not the only one. And then lastly, our sense for ego, for ourself. All right, so ego and the uppercase I, the ego is a lower developed version. Remember how I always say you get the ego for free? But the I you have to work for. Yeah, a proper sense of self, a proper sense of who you are. This is what we call the true self, which from a spiritual perspective functions like a mediator between, your spiritual I, your soul, okay, and your ego, your material I. Yeah, your ego is your material I. So those are actual senses that we all have. And the problem with us not even knowing most of these, or, well, we know 5. Those are the ones that we're taught. So that leaves 7 senses that we have that nobody ever teaches us. So if you look into slightly better biology books, you will see this. There is an acknowledgement of 12 human senses, and they will refer to the 4 senses of your body, the senses of touch, life force, movement, and balance. They will refer to the other 4 senses of the external world, smell, taste, visual, and temperature. And they will refer to the last set of 4 senses of the immaterial, and that is hearing, speech, thought, and ego. So this is interesting that hearing is part of this, because we know from biology that hearing is actually linked to the material. There is an actual little bone that vibrates based on the sound waves. But the way it's being processed internally, the same with speech, thought, and your sense of self, is different from these other senses. We can conclude that, just like how we said about the zodiac, also 12, that each sense makes a different observation, but the observations and the senses which make them are complementary. So they do work together, whether we are aware of it or not. So together, they are what forms a coherent whole. So if they're not seen together, if we're not actually using all of them, we're really only seeing or perceiving parts of our reality. And when I say reality, I am referring to both the material and immaterial reality, because we all have an experience of an immaterial reality. Yeah? We have the experience. Whether science can explain those or not is secondary, but we have the experience. It's part of our human experience. Every human experiences something like a sense of self, something like a thought, something like speech or language forming inside of themselves. All right. It isn't until we train those, and especially when we begin to train them to work together, all right, that we're starting to get the whole picture. And this is a big part of energy awareness training, is that we become more aware of all these different senses and organs of perceptions, and that we, you know, pay a little more attention to them. And maybe even if it sounds like a lot right now when I say it this way, but in sort of a simplified way, just go through the list and question. Okay, question. Yeah. What does this taste like? What does this smell like? What does this look like? What does this sound like? What does this, feel like when I touch it? That's obvious. But also, does it feel warm or not? Does it feel balanced? Does it feel fluid? Does it feel stagnant? Does it feel full of life force, or does it feel kind of dead? Does it feel, like it wants to, make me want to express something? Yeah, this would be the sense of speech. Yeah. Does it inspire me intellectually? Does it create new thoughts in me? And lastly, how does it feel to me as a whole? How does it relate to me as a self? Yeah, so these would be examples of how you could, you know, utilize, all your senses and bring them into the boat and start getting a more differentiated picture of your reality. And last but not least, yourself, so that you can understand your own journey better. So we've got the senses. Now let's look at the feelings. How do we feel? Okay, so we sense and feel with our body. We sense and feel with our body. Because this is such a big issue, let's make examples. Yes, Janet, you're raising your hand. I see it.
I just have a question, and maybe it falls into one of these other categories and not the body, but
Mm-hmm.
is there's a sense of safety and survival?
Yeah, I mean, a sense of safety and survival. This is,
Would that
in
be?
our instincts. That is not a sense. That is an actual instinct. We're
Mm,
born with that. Do you know what I mean? And that's pretty
mm,
static. That doesn't actually evolve. What evolves with our life experience is are the reference feelings. Okay, so last time I talked about the fire alarm that goes on, every time you turn on your toaster. Okay, anxiety is like that. It's a wrongly calibrated
mm,
sense for survival. How does this occur in a person? Anxiety, for example, develops through high degrees of cognitive dissonance. All right, yeah, like this excruciating pain that I talked about, and trauma, obviously. Yeah, so if you have a negative experience with something, if you have a negative memory of something, and that negative memory, the higher the trauma or the trauma load, the more it sort of misaligns your sense of survival. Do you know what I mean? What you're probably referring to is a condition where a person cannot feel that at all, cannot feel if something is, let's say, life-threatening. Yeah, this can also be caused by trauma, yeah, where that gets desensitized. Or, and this is the nature versus nurture component, yeah, or through normalization. So if things get normalized, if you, let's say you're born into a war zone and you grow up with constant bombings and fires and people around you dying, all right, your sense of survival will alter through that. Well, not your sense, or your instinct of survival will alter through that experience, because on one hand, you're going to form resilience, all right, because it's so normal that people die. You're not really, shocked by this anymore. But on the other hand, your biological drive and this just raw sort of desire to survive will make you do certain things. Yeah. So you may, disregard your morals, or you may disregard your integrity for the sake of survival on one hand, or you may become so numb to it that you don't care anymore. Okay, so these two things can occur to our survival instinct. Yeah, it can overdevelop or it can underdevelop, hyper or hyposensitized because of what it is that we are exposed to. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's, yeah.
So we sense and feel with our body. Sense and feel. Who of you has a good example for sensing and feeling with our body? The most common example for us humans. We experience it almost every day.
I know that if there's a mosquito in any proximity, I could start to feel it, and sometimes my skin just starts itching right away, and I have to work with anxiety with it because I still don't like getting bit by mosquitoes so
Okay, that's
much.
based on memory. All right. If you arrive here on this planet for the first time and you don't know what mosquitoes are, you would probably not experience that. Do you know what I mean? It's like you know what it means if there's a mosquito in the room with you,
Ah,
or what you're referring to is more like a psychosomatic reaction. So somebody tells you that they have lice, and you met that person a day before, and all of a sudden your head starts scratching. Anybody ever experienced that before? Yeah. Turns out you don't have lice, but
isn't the energy of the mosquito just, like,
no, it's not
mosquito has
mystical.
its own energy?
No,
No.
no,
Okay.
it's not mystical. Nope, 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 nope. It's conditioning. No, no, there's a better example for how we sense and feel with our body. Think of a good meal. How does a good meal make you feel? Yeah, it feels good for your body because your hunger is saturated, but it also makes you feel good, doesn't it? Sex. There's a lot of things in our life. They're very fundamental, okay? But they don't just come to our brain as a sensation, as a physical sensation. They also come to our brain as a feeling.
I think also, Yona, when you hear a beautiful piece of music
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
or art, seeing
Yeah.
something so
Yeah.
beautiful that, mm,
Yeah. Wonderful. It is. This is not tied to memory. I mean, there are some songs like, your favorite songs from the 80s or 90s or whatever, and you hear that, that's tied to memory. But there's something very objective about looking at flowers or looking at a sunset or looking at, just sort of a classic, beautiful piece of art. Yeah, that makes everybody feel good. And then there's the negative feelings that come with body sensations. For example, the the tags on clothing. I remember I used this as an example many times. For the longest time, I wasn't really able to differentiate that. I was just feeling uncomfortable Today, I pay a lot of attention to the kinds of fabrics and the tags and all these kind of things because they really influence the way I feel in my body. And I just simply don't wear things that are uncomfortable anymore. There is nothing mysterious about this, guys. There's nothing to do with energies. It's pure sensations and the feelings that arise in us. A comfort. Then number 2, we feel and express with our emotions. Okay. So we don't sense with our emotions, guys. We feel and express with our emotions. It's very important to differentiate. Our feelings are not the same as our emotions. Does everybody get that? A feeling includes more than just an emotion. An emotion is, something that, sits in you and that goes by. But a feeling is more of an overall state. Whereas an emotion can be just fleeting. Actually, the movie Inside Out captured this really well. It's a great movie for kind of understanding how neuroscience and neurotransmitters and so forth work. That's very cool. They did a good job there with that movie. But the next thing is the most important one. We interpret and contextualize with our thoughts. So how you see the world, how you see yourself, how you see life, how you interpret what you're sensing, what you're emoting, and what you're feeling. That happens in your head, in your thoughts. And we already know that there's a problem with our thoughts. Our thoughts are hardwired. They're programmed, they're conditioned, sometimes also mind-controlled. Inundated is a word that one of you used last time. And I just explained how, depending on the environment that we're in, we can sort of desensitize or hypersensitize to certain things, opinions, and views. Also, of course, trauma and karma can do that. But our thoughts, okay, 80% of our thoughts aren't actually thoughts that we thought ourselves. So just like with the feeling and the emotions, you got to differentiate your thoughts from your thinking. Okay, thinking is an action. That is an activity that you do. You think something through. That can include the questioning, that can include the reflecting, all that. Those are all cognitive functions. Your thoughts are sort of the end product of that. Many of you, and that's where the 80% comes from, never question your thoughts. You have sort of pre-made thoughts, like little sight word cards, okay, in your head, and you just stick them onto things, onto your sensations, your feelings, and your emotions, like labels, without actually thinking them yourself, without an actual action behind that. That's the definition of unconscious. You're not consciously thinking your thoughts. Yeah? You're labeling. It is a function of our brain that's actually quite cool. The categorizing and the compartmentalizing. This all comes from, our laziness, if you will. Yeah, we want to be, we want to be fast thinkers. But truth is, we're not actually thinking at all. We're just labeling with thoughts. Thoughts that weren't even necessarily thought by ourselves, that were pre-thought by somebody else or something else, that we were taught, that we were conditioned, that we were programmed with. So at the end of the day, our thoughts are thinking us. Why? Because that's what we use to interpret and contextualize things. So we've got to pay a lot of attention here to our thoughts, because 80% weren't even thought by you. All right? Or maybe they were thought by you a long time ago, but you changed since then. So it takes effort, it's work to actually think every thought for yourself. And the worst part of this statistic is that even if you try to make it a little more conscious and think more actively, and especially then, you'll find out that 90% of your thinking processes are repetitive. They're loops. So it's not just your thoughts, it's also your thinking process that is mostly determined by the outside. Now, the ruminating and the looping, all right, that's something that many of you have already become aware of. And that's something that, again, you need to learn the tools and strategies to mitigate that. That's something you can stop quite quickly. But to more consciously engage in your thinking process, that's a whole nother thing. And that takes years. It is, however, the foundation for making good choices. And this is what most of us are not aware of. We, blame our emotions, or we blame our body or our outer circumstances. But I can assure you that in 99% of your cases, it's your thoughts that cause your struggle and your misery. That's why, so many of these coaching programs and manifestation programs are all around your thoughts, because there's a lot of power in your thoughts, guys. And especially the kind of thoughts that you keep thinking over and over again. And there is, and here, Janet, now comes the energy. There's an energetic quality to every thought you have. Now, what do you think you're going to manifest or materialize is maybe a little more neutral. Okay. If you're stuck in that place that Julianne mentioned earlier, the scarcity and the lack, yeah, which is based on an overall state of fear, and all your thoughts are constantly around lack and scarcity, constantly and repetitively, what do you think you're going to manifest if 90% of your thoughts are constantly deriving around lack and scarcity? What do you guys think? What are you going to manifest in your life? And this is not mystical, but we haven't even arrived at the mystical part yet. How are you supposed to manifest a life in abundance and healing and love and kindness if all your thoughts in a constant and repetitive manner derive around scarcity and lack and fear?
Yeah, we're feeling and energizing that feeling
Yeah, it's
all
not
the time.
possible. Yeah, all you're going to recreate is that which you focus on.
And
That's which
the
all
choices
your
that we make
choices.
are
Yeah,
going to be based in that arena.
100%. That
Mm.
will be 100% based on that.
And then, like you say, we keep creating it and creating
Yeah,
it, so it
through the
just seems
choices.
true. Yeah.
Through
And
the
then it's like,
choices.
see, this is how it is.
There's the confirmation bias. Makes you feel good about yourself. See, I knew it.
I
I knew
knew.
it. Now the world is back in order because I was right. I was right. I knew that the world is bad and that everything is scarce and that love doesn't exist and people are just out to get me. Yeah.
If if I can feel my thoughts, like I'll be contemplating or something, and I feel my thoughts, and I'm considering things, and then I feel into that. I've noticed, well, I can notice they're constrictive. And then when I feel the constriction in my thoughts and the feeling that it gives me inside, I can look back at my past and go, it's just my past repeating over and over. I actually haven't gotten out of that paradigm, that
Now,
feeling.
when you say constrictive, so this is a word that we use in energy awareness. It's an energy lingo word.
Mm.
So what are you describing?
It feels like there's no other option. Like this is how it is.
No,
It
not the thoughts that come with it. What are you describing when you say constrictive? When you use the descriptor, the constrictive. What is it that you're describing? Are you describing an emotion or a sensation? Is it
yeah, it
a
feels like
spiritual
I'm pushing
perception?
pushing against something. So to feel constrictive to me feels like it's tight around. There's no way out. Even the thought can be
Mhm.
constrictive, but the feeling that I'm feeling in my body also feels rigid,
Right.
right? That I'm locked in to
So there's
something, and
something
there's
in your body. So
no room for movement.
your body's senses are informing you of something. This is a sensation that you're describing, constrictive.
Mm,
You're actually feeling it through your body. You use descriptors like rigid, boxed in. Okay,
mm,
very good. It's true. Yeah. So here's your body, yeah, that is informing you of something. And it's doing that through your feelings. Yeah, because you're not actually boxed in, right? I mean, you can move around freely, you can move your body around freely, but it still feels constrictive. It still feels imprisoned or boxed in or entrapped from within. Now, this is a sensation. So it's this first category here comes to show how important it is to listen to our body and the descriptors that we use. When the reason why this is, I call this energy lingo, is because we're referring to constrictive as an energetic sensation. It's an energetic sensation, but it has to do with the body. That's where it originates. Yeah.
yeah, my body can give me the signal to
Yeah.
notice.
Yeah.
Wait
It
a
does.
minute.
Yeah.
That's my wait a minute moment.
Yeah. And it affects your feelings.
hmm And my thoughts, yeah.
Well, yeah, it always also affects your thoughts. The question is, what was there first? The thought or the sensation or the feeling? Trauma patients are disconnected from their bodies. They're disconnected from this entire category here. All right, this is something that trauma does to us. Why does it do that? Because at a moment of trauma, whatever it is that we're sensing and that we're feeling, and also the emotions that we have, but mostly, the way it feels in our body is so overwhelming that it needs to be turned off. It needs to be turned off. It's like we become despondent. And in that moment, that was the right thing, because otherwise we would have, I don't know, depends on the situation. Don't want to go into this right now. But we would have maybe reacted in a way, like say you see a lion and you run away screaming. That wouldn't be beneficial, would it? Okay, so maybe it's better for you to sit still and stay calm. So in a trauma situation, we need to override these body feelings, if you will. And that's a good function that we have. But when we do this too often and when we don't process our trauma, when we don't heal a trauma well enough, then that strategy, that trauma coping strategy stays with us. And in the worst expression or worst presentation of that, it can lead to us dissociating, completely cutting ourselves off from our bodies, and or completely cutting ourselves off from our emotions. And you see what happens there. If you cut yourself off from this entire range of feeling here, you only getting half of it. In fact, most of you suffer from this. You suffer from really just experiencing yourself through your thoughts. There's a disconnect, yeah, to either your body or your emotions or both, which means that your range of perception is very, very small. It's through your head. And there's a problem with that I've shown to you already, yeah, that not only are 80% of your thoughts pre-made and not your own, not the product of your own thinking, they're also repetitive. Okay, so you can tell that, this looks pretty dire. If you've experienced trauma in your life, which most of us here have, all right, the main task for you healing and reinstating all your senses, all right, has to be to reconnect with your bodies, your body feeling, okay, and to reconnect with your emotions. Because these are extremely important sensors, if you will, that inform you about what it even is that you are experiencing. And only then, can you listen to your thoughts, okay, which are also filtered and biased. Okay, so you can't really use any of these things that are coming in if you don't have the full range, if you're not using all of your senses. What we have learned, though, and this is the cool thing about energy healing, is that if you increase your energetic awareness, if you allow yourself to tune into your energetic sensations and your energetic feeling, that you can bypass these hardwired trauma routes and dissociations and still perceive quite a bit. Let me repeat this. This is why energy healing is so effective with trauma, because you can bypass these neurological pathways that were formed based on trauma that led to dissociation or hypersensitivity in regard to your body sensations and your emotions, and therefore, basically being eliminated out of the range of your senses, okay, and also influencing your thoughts in a negative way. You can bypass those and focus on all of your senses without running into these premeditated or hardwired neural pathways. You can create new neural pathways. They not only reinstate, they can not only help you reinstate and heal, anything that went wrong here in these first three categories, they can form new neural pathways. So this is what we call neuroplasticity in neuroscience, but in energy work, we call this, basically augmenting or developing your spiritual senses. Why do we call this a spiritual sense? Simply because it doesn't use the regular sort of material electrical pathways in your body. It uses different senses, namely those that we also have, okay, but barely ever use. However, we still have them. So when you start, for example, working with your sense of ego, your sense of I, your true self, all right, you're bypassing hardwires that, you have created to certain sounds or certain visuals or certain tastes or smells, or certain types of touch. All these things that most therapies are useless for because they are hardwired. If you have a trauma affecting any of these 5 regular senses, it's very, very difficult and requires a lot of repetition for years and years and years for you to overcome those barriers. Whereas when you start working on your sense of self, when you start working on your conscious thinking, when you start working on your conscious expressing, yeah, and using these additional senses here, your sense for warmth. Does this feel warm to you? Does this feel cold to you? Not just in a physical temperature way, but does it give you the energetic sensation of warmth? Yeah, or does this feel cold? We're using the additional sense of balance. Does this feel balanced, or does this feel extreme? Does this feel out of balance? Or your sense of movement. Is there a good flow to things? Is there, like a fluidity of things? Or does it feel rigid? Does it feel boxed in? That's your sense of movement that informs you about this. And last but not least, your sense of vitality. Does this feel full of life? Is this conducive to life? Or is this restrictive or non-conducive for life? So really, guys, when we are working with all of our 12 senses, but especially these 3 senses of perception and these 4 senses of proception, we are using our energetic senses, our spiritual senses, if you will. Why? Because we're starting to put all the puzzle pieces together. Even if our 5 physical senses are inhibited, adding these other 7, yeah, and developing them and working on them can help you heal, all right, the other 5. Okay, so this is extremely important to note here, that our feeling, yeah, our overall feeling, yeah, it is related to emotions, but not primarily. It's composed of all these different ways of sensing things. And I know you guys like this kind of scientific stuff, although you could look this up yourself. We regulate and memorize through our thalamus. Okay, primarily sound, smell, and visual. Okay, it's this area here, this dark blue area, that's the thalamus. It's a part of our brain that regulates that. We store and process emotions in our amygdala. All right, that's this little piece here, that's the animalistic part of us. By the way, it's not the same as the reptilian brain. The reptilian brain is, when somebody refers to that, refers to the brain stem here. That's all just autonomous nervous system. We store complex physical processes in our cerebellum. Okay, that's right here, the dark purple area. We store declarative memory in our hippocampus. Okay, so the hippocampus is this area here. Declarative memory is you being able to put a label on something, you being able to, for example, answer my questions. Okay, who remembers having ever been in this and this or situation, or have you ever felt this, blah, blah, blah. All right, that's a declarative memory. I'm giving it a word. I often use different expressions, different sentences, because you guys all store it a little differently. You declare it as something differently. So I have to use a lot of different descriptors for you to recall this memory. And we contextualize with our sense of self and that of our world or life view, which is perceived through all our senses. And guess what? Your pituitary and your pineal gland is not in here, unfortunately. That's right here. All right, this is very, very important. That's why we can bypass trauma with our energetic awareness and the consequential strategies and tools, what we call healing, energy healing, because we're using different organs. All right. And as we're starting to develop our energetic senses, we can then begin to explore different roadmaps. For example, chakra system. The chakra says to feel into your chakras requires you to reconnect with your body feeling, with your emotions, with the way you're thinking. Yeah, so using chakras as a way to navigate our inner feeling. Yeah, again, here feeling in the sense of using all of our senses. All right, and therefore increasing our perception, yeah, from unconscious to conscious, can help us as a tool to locate things. Okay, it's a tool. There's other ways when you're a little bit more advanced. There are other roadmaps that you can use. Those of you who are doing etheric training and astral training with me, you guys have already been familiarized with some of the other tools. All right, we can use coordinates, we can use our sense of movement, we can use our sense for geometrical shapes, we can use our sense for warmth, we can use our sense for life force and so forth to identify what kind of realms, what kind of worlds we are in, and so forth. Yeah, what kind of entities, what kind of energies we're dealing with. But this all requires a lot of training, yeah, and first and foremost, us consciously reinstating the use of all our senses. We are a highly developed, a highly tuned instrument. The human body is the highest development in the material world. But by just relying on 5 out of 12 senses, guys, we are not very well calibrated to the world that we live in. So even though I just seem to have reduced all of this to the material aspect of our body, I am implying the spiritual, the mystical. Why? Because it is part of our reality. So just because we refuse to see it, yeah, or we think of ourselves that we can't see it, okay, it doesn't mean it's not there. It just means that you have not tuned your instrument right yet. And that's literally the next step in our consciousness evolution, is to tune our spiritual senses, to feed them, to purify them, to nurture them, and to refine them. This is what you guys are doing here. Even conversations as such, yeah, workshops, lectures, and so forth, they all help you to refine your perception. And now you've learned that you're basically just using 10% of your capacity. All right, 10% of what you could perceive. And that's not because you don't have the talent or the skill or whatever, because you don't have a certain knowledge. It's simply because you're not training it, you're not using it. Those are parts of you, of your instrument, that you haven't even discovered yet. Well, that's like if you have a 12-sided guitar and you've only ever used 2 of them. Can you imagine how much more complex, how much more beautiful, how much more alive and rich a song is when you have 12 sides to the guitar as opposed to just 2? It's like painting a picture with just two colors. So the primary question that you should always ask yourself, and this has to do with the mechanics of perception, is what is the state of my energy? What is my sense of self? And what is my life view? Because that basically paints the background and determines the number of colors of your painting. The painting being the quality of your perception. And the secondary question is, what is the content of what I'm perceiving? So the thought, the emotion, the body sensation, those are content. Okay? Content changes with the context, guys. Content changes with context. Yeah, I'm sad right now. I'm in a letting go process. I'm letting go of my old house. And I'm moving into my new house. And that new house has everything that I want, comes with a lot of work, but has the potential to be my dream house. So even though there's something positive in the future that is coming, this is the context, I am feeling sadness in me a little bit, letting go of my old neighborhood and, where I walk my dogs and have a tree and all the other dogs and, the little birdies that come every year and raise their chicklets right behind me here on the wall. Yeah, that fills me with momentary emotions of sadness. But the bigger context is that the reason why I have to let go of it is because I want to. Yeah, it's because I'm looking forward to a new future. You understand? That changes the quality, the context of me moving into something that I am consciously choosing changes the sadness. I'm still experiencing the emotion of sadness, but I wouldn't call myself being sad. I am experiencing moments of sadness. Sadness that comes from letting go. But my overall state is that of excitement, is that of elation, is that of expansion. Can you guys follow me here? Yeah, this is an example for showing you how the context determines the content. The content. And this is a tip that I have for all of you. That you begin to use new descriptors. Yes, I am experiencing a sensation in my body, but that is not my overall state. It is just a sensation that I'm experiencing. Or, yes, I'm experiencing intrusive thoughts, but that is not who I am. Those are just thoughts that I am experiencing right now. It's not the same as me. I'm not identifying with my thoughts. I'm not identifying with my body sensation. These are happening. They're real. All right. But this is not who I am. I am going through that. I am having those at this very moment. But I'm not allowing that to determine how I see myself and how I see the world or life itself. Yes, I am having emotions right now, but that's not who I am. I went through a lot of emotions today. Don't know about you, but I often experience a whole range of emotions. All of these different states and the emotions that come with it. But my overall state is not determined by that. I'm experiencing emotions. I'm experiencing thoughts, I'm experiencing sensations. And guess what? I'm okay with it. How are you? Oh, I'm experiencing this or this at the moment, but overall, I feel good. So, my recommendation is that you start differentiating the word feeling a little more, because this allows you to unhook, all your unconscious identifications with your body, with your emotions, and with your thoughts. And then, if you want to go further, you investigate the quality of your sensations, your emotions, and your thoughts. And guess what you're going to find out? I'm going to anticipate that for you. What you're going to find out is that your body sensations and your emotions, they just are. They just are what they are. They're, for the most part, physiological processes. We call it the body mind. But your thoughts and interpretations, your assumptions, your contextualizations, those depend on how you choose to see something. That's something that you can change. You cannot change your body from having these sensations. You cannot change your emotions. You can work on, letting your emotions dissipate. You can work on, I don't know, put a Band-Aid on a wound, or, like doing something about, if you're experiencing physical pain. Yes. But for the most part, they just are. It is your interpretation of them and what they mean and why me, and oh, and this always happens to me, and blah, 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 and this is so bad, and da, 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 and, and then the consequential sort of expression that goes along with it. Life is so hard. I'm so stressed. Oh my God, da, da, da. All right, that forms the context. Your thoughts and your expressions, they form the context. And with that, they form your energetic reality. Every thought, every sensation, every sentiment, every notion, every word, every body movement, every micro expression forms an energetic reality, forms etheric matter. And that energetic reality creates a context, and that context is what creates your reality. Again, every thought, every sentiment, every notion, every word, every action, every choice, every expression forms an energetic reality, forms etheric matter. And etheric matter, energetic reality, forms the context. And the context is what manifests your reality, what makes you do or make choices. Yes, I see your hand, Julianne.
Oh, sorry, Yona. I think I left it up from
Oh,
before.
okay, okay.
I was just feeling into that though too, and I feel like that's why it's so good looking back, or if something comes up for me now, and it triggers a memory from the past, and I go back and I haven't thought of that for such a long time, but something will come forward, and I can go right back to that moment and to those feelings, like say when I was 18 or 19,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and I have a memory and I feel it, and I'm like, oh, but I can recapitulate, bring back,
mm-hmm,
and feel, oh, that's where I was at. So all those stories
mm-hmm,
and movies that I made,
mm-hmm.
I'm learning they all have a piece there. If I can look back at it and actually feel it from where I am now, I can see all these stories and movies that um, from the past.
Error perceptions.
The
Mm-hmm.
error perceptions, and I can glean a piece of gold, or however you could say it, like there's something in there. And sometimes when something comes up, and I'm feeling a dissonance in me, and I can remember a past. It will just come, something in the past. I remember that. I remember feeling like that. I can pull that in, and it makes me consciously aware in the moment to question, hang on, what's going on now? What is that? And I
Yes.
remember that old movie, and I remember that, and I'm like, oh. And then there's a really beautiful feeling of I've broken free.
Hmm.
I've extra well, yeah, had an insight. Yeah,
Do you know what you broke free from?
my error, my ego, my and the false self, or whatever it
No,
was, like a
no,
belief
no. The
of,
memory, the memory filtering
yeah,
it
the
out. The
memory
movie, yeah,
mm,
the movie from the past, the error
yeah,
perception from the past. Okay,
and the
with the
pain,
and the negative feeling with it.
yeah,
Okay,
and the pain that was there, and then I've healed it. So it comes into like, oh, and I heal it from the past. Yeah,
so I want to take the sticky note that I put up there, the virtual sticky note that came up when Janet shared in the beginning, and she said something. She questioned the use of the purpose of going into the past. Okay, this is a very good example that Julian gave us here. How going in the past can be extremely useful and healing, but it has to be done in a conscious manner. It has to be done with you first and foremost being able to stay neutral, then being able to discern your error perceptions. Yeah. So the fact, Julia, that you could say, I recognize the movie, I recognize the error perception of back then. I can see it clearly now. I have an insight about this. I thought this through myself. Yeah. It's this is an accomplishment. Okay. You realize how you were in the wrong movie back then. No wonder you made those choices. In fact, you probably couldn't even have done other choices. It gets a little trickier if we remember a time where we had all these insights already, but we just couldn't muster, say, the courage or the energy to do something about that. Do you guys know that pain too? That's almost worse. Okay, it's
yeah,
one
that's
thing to be
worse because
uh,
we know
yeah,
better, right? But we
mhm.
continue going down the same path. But
Yeah, so the first example was innocence. The second example was ignorance.
mm,
And ignorance magnifies this excruciating pain, the cognitive dissonance. Okay. And that often has to do with karmic stuff. Okay. So there is a certain learning experience that we've already made. There's an insight that we had. And yet we refuse, all right, to actually turn that into an action. Instead, we keep repeating it. And this is, how karma works. It allows us to repeat things until we realize how ignoring it ain't going to change it either. Until first it was just innocence, then it was ignorance. How ignorance is not going to prevent us from re-experiencing the same pain over again. And latest then is when wisdom kicks in. And wisdom says, you know what? I'm done with this. I don't want this in my life anymore. I've gone through this so many times in so many different variations. It ain't going to go anywhere. It's getting old. I just don't do that anymore. Bam. And there you have power. That's power. That's your will. Your will then says, I'm just not going to get involved with guys like this anymore. Or I'm just not going to do jobs that I hate anymore. Or I'm just not going to, I refuse to see the world as evil or scarce, or I'm tired of my constant fear. I'm tired of this or this or this. I refuse that. I refuse that reality. I do not want that reality. Instead, I want, and now you fill in the blanks. Okay. And from here on, I'm going to do everything that I can to my best awareness, to my best abilities, at the given time to follow that. From here on, I'm making more conscious choices. From here on, I'm utilizing, listening to all my senses. I am putting this into account. I'm actually working with my full instrument, and I'm only making choices based on that. This is what we call perception training. Yeah, our senses need to be trained. If we don't train our senses, we will get stuck in our ego and instinct and drive, yeah, the lower notions, yeah, of your humanhood for the rest of your life. So if you don't want to get stuck in that ego place, feel unfulfilled and empty and have regrets, then you need to train your senses. And this practice purifies, nurtures, and refines them. The more you use your senses, all of your senses, yeah, and this includes your spiritual senses, the more you will perceive. They will perceive. The more information they will give you, the more wisdom they will provide for you. Yeah. And just so you know, if you don't do this consciously, life is going to do that to you. And this is why I call karma the insurance policy. Yeah, it will force you to train your senses in a way, just like how we are forced to grow up. We can't remain children all our lives. We have to become adults. That's part of our natural evolution. If we try to stop that natural evolution, we're devolving. All right, we're going backwards. So it's okay to act like a 5-year-old when you're 5-year-old, but it's not okay to act like a 5-year-old when you're 50 years old. And how does this happen, this purification of our perception? It will still happen when you do it consciously, but it will happen in fast forward, and it will happen with you being able to contextualize it. You will understand what is going on. You will get it, why it must happen. And it happens through life changes, sudden life changes. It happens through your body changing, through your sensations changing. It happens through stress and overwhelm, where you're just not able to take it anymore. And if none of that worked on you, it's going to happen through the dark night of the soul. The dark night of the soul is an extremely valuable tool for us humans to evolve. Because right there is no turning your back on things. There's no ignoring anymore. You have to look at what it is that you refuse to look at. This is why, dark nights of the soul are so painful, because we have to look at our shadows and all these things. And now you know how to overcome your dark night of the soul. You include all of your senses, and you recognize that when you did this, or when you're in this or that state, you're not using them. You're only using less than half of you. No wonder that you come to these low, kind of choices. There is, however, another aspect to perception, and that's something that many of you have already discovered but are not fully aware of. There's a relationship between your sensory perception and health and vitality. Now, most of you know that when you start getting sick, that your overall state of energy goes low, right? Raise your hand. You know what I'm talking about, right? So your overall life force goes low, okay? And sometimes you don't even know where this is coming from. You just feel that your overall state is low. And you can notice how your thoughts are getting darker and how your emotions are getting more negative. Okay, so that's because there is this connection, but you have to be able to see that your body, for example, is in a lower state of life force, and therefore your entire perception now goes low. And in a positive sense, if you raise your overall state of energy, if you work on better diet, better exercise, better life circumstances, higher life quality, better job, all this, anything that increases your life force, then that will also increase your perception. It increases the intensity and your life aliveness, if you will, and your perceptivity. So all your senses turn on. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Those are the moments where you feel totally inspired. And whoa, the world opens up in front of you because all of a sudden you have so much life force. Yeah, that's this state of inspiration. It increases your perception. Inspiration is not something that comes over you. Inspiration is a consequence of you living in a high state of life force. The healthier and the more vital you are, the more intensive and perceptive your observations. And last but not least, there's a relationship between the use of your senses, the conscious life view and the vitality that comes with it, your energetic state, your level of training, and your ability to discern truth. So the higher your vitality, the higher your perception, the higher your ability to discern truth. When you're in a constant low state, be it fear, be it anger, superiority, blah, 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 shame, guilt, pain, you cannot discern truth. Period. So remember this, guys. This is very, very complex. And when you run into issues with perception, always ask or remind yourself, how am I perceiving what I'm perceiving right now? And that's when you should remember your 12 senses, when you should remember your sensing, your feeling, your thinking, and your energetic perceiving. Because if you can go through these 4 at least, and I've created all kinds of wellness checks with you guys. Don't you know all these? They're all in the Sacred Self-Healing Steps. Okay, where I'm training this with you. I'm training you to differentiate these different aspects, be it, your physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, energetic situation, and the triggers that are coming in from the outside, be it the imbalances of your needs and wants, or be it, the conduciveness. Is this even, sustainable? Is this even desirable for me? Is this even acceptable? Is this even ethical? Is this even balanced? Yeah, so you can see here, there's the color coding that I use everywhere to help you differentiate more, to help you tune your spiritual senses and organs. Yeah, all based here on how to make more conscious choices. And again, here you see those different levels. They're determined by different layers of your perception system. And there's the body mind that combines the physical, emotional, mental through your neurotransmitters and your nervous system. And then there's your your consciousness organs, yeah, your spiritual organs. They're determined by your beliefs, your karma, your purpose, and your ability to consciously choose, your ability to consciously live. Okay? And that's then how you get to understand yourself. Ultimately here is spiritual science as a physical, astral, etheric, and consciousness soul. All right, so that's basically here, in fast forward the different levels of perception, because that's how you actually, here also the senses that are associated with that, okay, and the spiritual organs that play a role in those levels of perception and what can go wrong. Yeah, so here, uh, energetically expressed, these are the kind of things that you see in these different layers of perception. But what's more important and, really sort of fundamental in understanding your own error perceptions is what the barriers are. Yeah, what are the barriers that do not allow you to see things? Today, we've covered tools and strategies on how to bypass these barriers, how to overcome them, how to overcome issues with perception by training your spiritual senses and organs, or in short, your energetic awareness. Okay, now that allows you on the different levels of perception to overcome the barriers that are in place there. And this is what I wanted to share with you guys here today. We've come to the end of this workshop. And this is the moment where you can ask some questions if you have any comments, maybe. The next workshop in the series is going to deal with fear. Okay, because we already understand that fear is underneath all of these barriers, and we're going to go a little deeper into this. It's just one workshop, handling the role of fear and how to overcome fear. Do you have any comments or questions? Did you find this workshop and the information displayed here useful? What are your takeaways? All right, then let's close right here. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you so much, Janet and Julian, for sharing. Yeah, you've contributed greatly here for all of us to deepen our understanding and to get different perspectives. I'm very grateful for this. Thank you very much. And I wish you guys a wonderful time until I see you next time. The next energy talk is going to be the True Self talk, coming up on the 21st of June, a day after the solstice. Oh yeah, and I have actually scheduled a live energy talk on the solstice on the 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So next week I'm going to see you guys twice, not for a workshop, but for a lecture and commentary on our free Connect with Your True Self energy healing and training session, which, as you know, I think is the most important process that we can engage in these days. I love you guys and see you soon. Bye-bye.